Government has authorized the recruitment of an additional Army brigade, which is beginning on Wednesday. This brigade will be known as the Canadian Army Special Force. This brigade will be available for service in Korea as part of United Nations forces. The action of the United Nations in Korea is not war. It is police action intended to prevent war.
They were just like ants coming up the hill, like the shells were landing and just blowing to pieces.
The Korean War, 1950 to 1953. A war that almost 50 years later is rarely mentioned. A war that has been dubbed, and with good reason, the Forgotten War. But for the brave Canadian veterans like Herbert Norris, the experience is anything but forgotten.
The Americans went in and dropped napalm down the sides and across the ends with 3 divisions of North Koreans or Chinese in there. Well, you're talking 60,000 to 90,000 men in one daylight hours that were literally cooked in one valley. And, you know, it's hard to just, for anybody to visualize the numbers. And then just turn around and say it was a police action. I wouldn't want to see a war. Dug a hole in the side of a hill. We lived like groundhogs. There's some photographs on the table there that shows that and we're on the back side of the hill, and you just put rocks and or timbers and then rocks and the sandbags over top. So if it rained, the water run through, you get wet. And I still think Korea must have been a place for the Pied Piper, because the rats over there were just astronomical in size. I had one just on the way home. I was in a marquee tent, and I had left a sleeping bag just a hole to breathe through, and I was asleep, but I don't sleep very sound. I'm very alert and sound now. I don't know why, but a rat crawled in and he bit me on the nose. He left a 3 teeth mark, and I had him just the time he bit me. I must have known he was coming, but I punched him and I opened my eyes to see him going over the other bed.
Norris has many memories, all of them vivid. One in particular stands out.
So there was 5 North Koreans or Chinese, whatever they were. They came down one rice paddy, and I was down about 2 feet on the next elevation, only about, I guess they're maybe 10 feet apart at the most. And they were maybe 15 feet from me, and I opened up with the American carbine. I had American carbine. They wanted the Chinese to think we were Americans instead of, they give us American weapons. And that's why if they heard them firing, they'd figure they were Americans and not Canadians. And they all went down, and none of them came back up. So, but when you hit them, they don't fall over. They come up off the ground. They'll come up with a foot off the ground when the bullets hit them. It's like being hit with a truck almost, you know. And everybody visually just fall down, but you don't. And you could hear the bullets ripping into them. You could hear the agony of, you know, the flesh being torn apart.
This famous photo was taken the morning after Herbert Norris killed those 5 men. The exhaustion and the emotion in the man's face have come to symbolize the Canadian soldier's experience in Korea.
I was brought up in a Christian home, and you're not supposed to do these things. And all of a sudden you take 5 human lives. They could be enemy, but they're still human beings. They're not just figures. And this is something I find that a lot of people that are not in the actual combat don't really see the agony of the other enemy dying. When you're in a one-to-one situation, you know that you've done it, and you can't say somebody else did this, because, you know, it's your responsibility sort of thing.
There is still confusion today over who the man really is. Norris insists it's him.
I was out all night. I just came back, and I was on the way in through the barbed wire. They either dropped a mortar or shell, and it hit the mud, and it went into the mud and then exploded, and it just blew. I got blown about 25 feet in the air, and my ring I had on, it came off. A piece of shrapnel must have hit it or something, because when I got 3 weeks later after I returned to the hospital, they gave it back to me, but it had my initials on it. It had been cut and broke, like that's why it came off. So I couldn't hear anything. I was totally deaf. when the photographer that took the picture was talking to me. That's why I think there was such a mix-up.
He means the mix-up on the photo's caption. It reads, Private Heath Matthews, not Herbert Norris. Norris thinks that the photographer Paul J. Tomlin made a mistake, and Norris has been fighting his own battle for recognition ever since.
Well, I'm getting a little perturbed with the people that are doing it, because I think that, when it was in question in 1984, when this was all controversy, there was 19 phone calls to the house here, and not one of them would come and look at these captions from the National Archives. They're the original captions that I give you guys. They're the original captions from the archives. And now they're saying that it's the other guy when the caption proves it.
But this dismay goes beyond one man's struggle for recognition. The Korea War Memorial in Brampton, Ontario also remains widely unrecognized. Bill Allen is a member of the Korea War Veterans Association of Canada, the group responsible for this wall of remembrance. It commemorates the 516 men who were killed on the Korea War front. The memorial is dear to Allen, not only because he played a key role in its construction, but because it is a tribute to a friend.
This is Tootie McDonald's plaque. He was killed on the 8th of January, 1953. And myself and R.J. Floyd and a small patrol carried his body in. And it's been very near and dear to us. And he is the inspiration of this whole beautiful wall. There's many other stories out there, many stories among all of these men.
The $300,000 cost of the wall was scraped together by the association from personal donations, garage sales, and the generous support of the Royal Canadian Legion. However, the group is disappointed the federal and provincial governments have never shown any interest or involvement.
First of all, we asked the Prime Minister to come by letter. We asked Lieutenant Governor to come. We got refusals on all avenues of that. And not to belittle it, but we had to go with the Korean ambassador to Canada to help me build the wall. And it was I'm not saying it was the only type of person. He was proud to do it, and we were proud to ask him to do it. It was only that we thought our own Canadian government would be involved in such a wonderful memorial such as this towards the Canadians that died in Korea, gave their lives, and those who dared to die but lived.
This lack of response goes all the way back to the signing of the armistice, the peace agreement in 1953. Ted Barris, author of the bestseller Deadlock in Korea, explains why.
The Canadians who came back from Korea were never really acknowledged for their service. For some reason, because of the fact that they came back in scattered fashion, because the war hadn't ended in a finite fashion, because the government never really called it a war, it was always known as the Korean conflict until years later. The Canadian government didn't give the Korea veterans their volunteer medals, a medal that acknowledged their volunteering for service in Korea and for the United Nations, until 1992, nearly 50 years after the war was over. And the reason they finally did give the Korea veterans their medals was that the previous year, 1991, the Canadian government gave the Persian Gulf War veterans their volunteer medals, and somebody recognized the oversight, and they made this up to the Korea veterans. But it was sort of like oh, we forgot, let's try to make this up.
I got on a train with a bunch of other guys, and through the whistle stops right across Canada. The guys got off, and there's nobody there. They went home, to their homes, and just knocked on the door and went in and said, hey, I'm home. And I come from a family of 13 myself, so they were all there to meet me when I come home. But that's all. There was nobody else. No, not like the Americans with the big bands and the flags and the hoopla of receiving their boys back home and proud of them because they fought, proud that they come home. It didn't happen here in Canada.
It was a very interesting time, the 1950s, in Canadian history. We were 5 years since the end of the Second World War, and people were sick and tired of death and war. We had gone through 2 world wars, 1914 to 18, 1939 to 45. And in 1950, people were looking to picking up peace dividend, getting back to Civvy Street, starting families. That's when the baby boom began.
But for the 26,000 Canadians who served on the soils of South Korea, the war was a grim reality.
I went over there as a boy, and I come back as a man. Having seen many, many different deaths, wounds, the Korean people themselves suffering the way they did.
I started third day home. I started walking towards Princess Street to come down Princess Street and then cross the bridge to my mother's in the village and their dad's. And I don't know what happened, but I took off running, and I passed 2 or 3 relatives on the street, and they spoke to me, and I kept right on going. When they told me that, I said, well, I got a problem. And I think this is what really helped me, was the fact that I got help right away, and I was fortunate that way. But the younger ones that were 18, 19 years old, or 19 years old, most of them are having bad trouble now with their nerves. They're really having troubles with it, having to get help. But they stuffed it away, and it's festering now, and it should have been brought out right away. We should have done the same as the Vietnamese and the veterans in the States. They should have been in a group therapy with the psychiatrists, the wives, and the whole bit, and talked about it so that, they could bring it out.
I would like Canada to recognize the fact that this is what we feel the final resting place for the 516 young Canadians who died. We want the people of the future, we want the people today even to come and recognize this wall and see what a beautiful piece of work it is, and say a prayer for them.
For Herbert Norris, closure means finally being recognized as a soldier in the photo.
I tried to talk to the director of the War Museum and to tell him, that I had the original captions that showed that my name on it and everything else, but he wasn't interested in even coming down. Well, I'd just be happy to get the recognition for what I did. I mean, they used my photograph, and I think they could at least recognize me as, the person in it.
The poem on this wall does recognize the Canadian men who died in Korea, and asks us not to forget those who shall not grow old as we grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them.